During my daughter's wedding, which I raised her alone, the groom's family left a sign on my table that said, "Horrible and fake mom." Everyone laughed, but when I tried to leave, my daughter said that no one messes with me. My name is Rosa, and I need to tell you about the day that changed everything for my family. You might think you know how this story goes, but trust me, you don't. I raised my daughter Isabella alone since she was 4 years old. Her father decided that family responsibilities weren't for him and disappeared one day, leaving me with a little girl who asked for months when Daddy was coming home. I worked 2 jobs, cleaning office buildings at night and serving tables during the day, scraping together every dollar for her future. Isabella was my everything. When she graduated valedictorian, I sat in that auditorium wearing a dress I'd found at Goodwill, tears streaming down my face with pride. Her full scholarship to the state university felt like validation that all those years of exhaustion and sacrifice had meant something. When Isabella told me she was marrying Ryan, I was genuinely happy for her. He came from old money. His family owned half the commercial real estate downtown and lived in one of those historic mansions that looked like something from a movie. I'll be honest, I felt intimidated during their engagement parties. But Isabella loved him, and that was enough for me. The wedding day arrived, and I wore a navy blue dress with small flowers, the nicest thing I owned, purchased specifically for this occasion. The venue was the Grandview Country Club, where I'd once cleaned their windows during a catering event years ago. Now I was walking through the front door as family. Everything gleamed with old money, chandeliers that caught the afternoon light, floors so polished they reflected the ceiling, arrangements of orchids and roses that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I felt out of place immediately, but I held my head high. This was my daughter's day, and I belonged here because she wanted me here. I found my assigned seat at a table toward the back of the ballroom. That should have been my first warning sign. The mother of the bride relegated to the cheap seats while Ryan's extended family occupied the premium tables near the altar. But I told myself it didn't matter. I was here to support Isabella, not to compete with people who measured worth by bank account balances. That's when I saw the place card. Instead of simply reading Rosa Martinez, there was a handwritten note underneath in elegant script. "Fake and uneducated mother doesn't belong with decent people." My hands started shaking as I read it again, hoping I'd misunderstood. But the words were clear, deliberate, and cruel. I looked around and noticed Ryan's family at the head table, whispering among themselves and glancing in my direction. His mother, Catherine, caught my eye and actually smiled. Not a warm smile, but the kind of smile predators give their prey. A few of Ryan's relatives started chuckling, pointing at me like I was entertainment for their amusement. I heard one of his aunts whisper loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, "Well, what did you expect from someone like that?" 23 years of hard work, sacrifice, and unconditional love reduced to a joke on a piece of paper. These people, in their designer clothes and inherited confidence, had decided that my worth as a human being was something to laugh about. The shame burned through me like acid. Every eye in that room seemed to be on me, judging my dress, my shoes, my very presence in their sacred space. My first instinct was to leave quietly. Don't make a scene. Don't ruin Isabella's special day. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor, and started walking toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear more quiet laughter, whispered comments about knowing my place. But then I heard Isabella's voice cutting through the murmur. "Mom? Mom? Where are you going?" I turned around to see my daughter walking toward me in her beautiful white dress, looking confused and concerned. The entire ballroom had gone quiet, all these wealthy guests watching our family drama unfold like it was dinner theater. "It's okay, mija," I managed to say, my voice barely steady. I think I should go." But Isabella's expression changed as she took in the scene, the crumpled note still in my hand, her new in-laws' guilty faces, my obvious distress. I watched my sweet daughter transform into someone I barely recognized, her jaw tightening with an anger I hadn't seen since she was a child defending herself from playground bullies. "Mom, show me what they wrote," she said firmly. "Isabella, please," I whispered. "It's your wedding day. Don't make a scene because of me." But my daughter, my brilliant, strong daughter who I'd raised to never let anyone diminish her worth, gently took the note from my trembling hands. As she read it, I watched her face go through a transformation that would be burned into my memory forever. The blushing bride disappeared, replaced by a woman with fire in her eyes. She turned toward the head table where Ryan sat in his perfect tuxedo, looking mortified and pale. "Ryan," Isabella called out, her voice carrying clearly across the silent room, "did you know about this?" I watched my new son-in-law's face crumble as he realized what had happened. He started to stammer, Isabella, I swear I didn't. My mother must have. Your mother? Isabella's voice rose dangerously. Your mother thought it would be appropriate to humiliate the woman who raised me, who sacrificed everything for me on our wedding day. Catherine Ryan's mother stood up with that same cruel smile still on her face. Isabella, darling, we were simply trying to maintain some standards. Surely you can understand that your mother doesn't quite fit in with our social circle? That's when Isabella did something that shocked everyone in that elegant ballroom, including me. She started removing her wedding jewelry. First, the pearl earrings Catherine had insisted she wear. Then, the diamond bracelet that was a family heirloom. You're absolutely right, Isabella said, her voice deadly calm. My mother doesn't fit in with people like you, and neither do I. She handed the jewelry to a stunned bridesmaid and began lifting her wedding dress slightly as she walked over to where I stood frozen in shock. Isabella, no, I pleaded. This is your wedding. These people spent money. Your friends are here. You've planned this for months. These people, she said loudly, making sure everyone could hear, just showed me exactly who they are. And my real friends would never disrespect my mother. She took my arm and started walking me toward the exit, her wedding dress trailing behind us like a white banner of defiance. Past all those shocked faces, past the expensive flower arrangements, past the 5-tier cake that would never be cut. Isabella! Ryan called desperately from behind us. Please, we can work this out. It was just a misunderstanding. My daughter stopped at the doorway and looked back one final time. The only misunderstanding, she said clearly, was thinking you and your family were worthy of being part of mine. If you leave now, Catherine shrieked, you'll be nothing. No money, no connections, no future. Isabella looked at her soon-to-be former mother-in-law with pity. I'll have something you'll never understand. Dignity. And just like that, we walked out of that country club together. My daughter chose me over her wedding, over the man she thought she loved, over the wealthy life she could have had. As we got into my old Honda in the parking lot, I finally found my voice. Mija, what have you done? You just walked away from your future. Isabella looked at me with fierce love in her eyes. No, Mom. I just walked toward it. When we got home to my small house, Isabella was still in her wedding dress, but she'd never looked more like herself. I made us coffee, the same Colombian blend I'd been buying for years, and we sat at my kitchen table in silence for a while. You want to talk about what just happened? I finally asked. I want to call Miguel, she said, referring to her older brother. And Uncle Carlos, and Uncle Roberto, and Cousin Danny. I raised an eyebrow. Mija, that's not necessary. We don't need to involve the whole family in this mess. But Isabella was already dialing. Within 2 hours, my living room was packed with the men of our family, and let me tell you, they were absolutely livid. Miguel, who's 3 years older than Isabella and has been her protector since childhood, was pacing around my small living room like a caged animal. They wrote what on Mom's place card? Carlos, my younger brother, cracked his knuckles in a way that made me nervous. Those rich pendejados have no idea who they just messed with. Roberto, my older brother who'd done time in his youth and never backed down from a fight, was Googling something on his phone. I found them. Look at this. Ryan's whole family is going to be at some charity auction this Saturday. Supporting local arts programs. He read with disgust. Hypocrites. Danny, Carlos's son, was the youngest man in the room but had inherited the family temper. Tia Rosa, you raised the strongest woman I know. How dare they disrespect you like that? I looked around at these fierce men, my brothers who had helped me raise my children when money was tight, my son who had always been my protector, my nephew who worked construction to support his own family. They were all talking at once, planning something I wasn't sure I wanted to know about. Guys, please, I interrupted. I appreciate the support, but I don't want any trouble. What's done is done. Miguel stopped pacing and looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Mom, they humiliated you at Isabella's wedding. In front of everyone. They made you feel ashamed of working honest jobs, of raising your children with love instead of money. Your son's right, Carlos added, his voice getting heated. We've been watching those snobs look down on our family for months. But this crosses every line. Isabella finally spoke up. I told them about the charity auction. It's this Saturday at the Riverside Convention Center. Black tie, very exclusive, very public. Roberto held up his phone. I just bought tickets for all of us. Apparently, they'll take anyone's money for a good cause. You did what? I asked, alarmed. We're going to that fancy party, Carlos announced. And we're going to show Ryan's family exactly what happens when you mess with a woman who raised her children with dignity and respect. I looked at my family. These men who had stood by me through every struggle, who had celebrated every small victory, who had never once made me feel ashamed of working with my hands to provide for my children. "What are you planning to do?" I asked, though part of me was afraid of the answer. Miguel smiled, and it wasn't his sweet, charming smile. It was the smile he wore right before he'd beaten up the kids who used to make fun of Isabella's secondhand clothes in high school. "We're going to teach them some respect," he said simply. Danny was already looking up formal wear rental places on his phone. "We need to look the part. Can't have them thinking we don't belong at their precious charity event." "This is a bad idea," I said. But even as I said it, I felt something stirring in my chest. Not revenge exactly, but something like justice. Roberto put his hand on my shoulder. "Rosa, you've spent your whole life being the bigger person. You've taken every insult, every slight, every moment when people looked down on you because you weren't educated enough or wealthy enough. But they went after your worth as a mother, and that's sacred." I looked around at these strong, determined men, and I realized they weren't doing this for revenge. They were doing this for love, for me, for Isabella, for every working parent who'd ever been made to feel less than worthy by people who inherited their worth instead of earning it. Saturday night arrived with the weight of inevitability. I watched my men get ready like they were preparing for war, which, in a way, they were. Miguel had rented a sharp black tuxedo, but kept his hair slicked back in what I called his business look. Carlos wore his lucky cufflinks, the ones he'd worn to every important confrontation in his life. Roberto had gotten a fresh haircut, but moved like a boxer preparing for a fight. Danny looked handsome in his formal wear, but carried himself like he was ready for anything. "Mom, you don't have to come if you don't want to," Isabella offered one last time. "After everything you're doing for me, I wouldn't miss it." The Riverside Convention Center had been transformed into an elegant venue. Crystal chandeliers, expensive art displays, waiters carrying champagne flutes. We walked in looking every bit as sophisticated as the other guests. But I could feel the difference in my family. These men had purpose. It didn't take long to spot Ryan's family. They were at a VIP table near the front, laughing and holding court like royalty. Catherine was wearing what probably cost more than I made in 6 months. Her husband, Richard, kept adjusting his gold watch like it was a badge of honor. Ryan looked miserable, probably still processing what had happened at his wedding. "There they are," Isabella whispered. She'd insisted on coming too, wearing a simple black dress that made her look more beautiful than she had in her expensive wedding gown. "Remember what we discussed," Roberto murmured. "We wait for the right moment." The right moment came during the live auction portion of the evening. Richard had just made a big show of bidding $8,000 on a weekend wine tour, basking in the applause and admiration from nearby tables. That's when Miguel made his move. He walked up to Richard's table with a confidence I'd never seen before. "Mr. Hartwell, I'm Miguel, Rosa's son. You remember my mother, the one your family thought was so amusing at the wedding?" The color drained from Richard's face. Catherine looked around nervously, probably hoping this confrontation wouldn't happen in such a public place. I'm not sure what you're talking about," Richard stammered. "Oh, I think you do." Miguel's voice was calm, but carried clearly to the surrounding tables. "You remember? The note calling her a fake and uneducated mother?" By now, people at nearby tables were starting to listen. This was exactly what Miguel had planned for. Carlos appeared at Richard's other side. "See, the thing is, our mother worked 2 jobs to make sure her kids had everything they needed. She taught us that respect isn't something you inherit. It's something you earn." Roberto approached Ryan, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "And you, boy, you threw away the best woman you'll ever know because your family told you she wasn't good enough." That's when things escalated beyond what anyone expected. Richard, probably panicked by the attention, stood up and made a fatal mistake. "Security!" he called out loudly. "These people are threatening us." That was Danny's cue. At 28, he was the youngest of my men, but he'd grown up in our neighborhood where you learn to defend yourself early. When Richard pointed at them to call security over, Danny stepped forward. "The only threat here," Danny said firmly, "is to your reputation when everyone finds out what kind of people you really are." Richard tried to push past Danny, and that's when everything changed. Miguel caught Richard's arm, not roughly, but firmly enough to stop him. "We're not done talking," Miguel said. What happened next was like watching a perfectly choreographed lesson in justice. Richard tried to pull away and somehow ended up stumbling backward. Catherine started shrieking about assault, but Carlos calmly reminded everyone that they had simply approached to talk, and Richard was the one who had escalated things physically. Roberto moved toward the other men in Ryan's family who were starting to stand up, probably thinking they needed to help. But these were men who had never been in a real fight in their lives. facing men who had grown up in neighborhoods where you fought for respect and survival. "Sit down," Roberto said quietly, and something in his voice made them obey immediately. The beauty of it was that my family never threw the first punch, never did anything that could get them arrested. But within minutes, every man in Ryan's family was sitting down, looking pale and shaken, while my men stood around them like guardians of justice. The whole ballroom was watching now, phones coming out, whispers spreading like wildfire. Ryan's family, so used to commanding respect through money and status, had been reduced to looking like scared children in front of everyone they wanted to impress. And the entire event got to see what real strength looks like when it's defending someone who deserves it. The confrontation at the charity auction was just the beginning. When we got home that night, Isabella was unusually quiet. I could see something brewing in her, something that worried me as her mother. "That felt good," Miguel said, loosening his tie. "Did you see Richard's face when everyone started staring?" "I recorded some of it," Danny added, holding up his phone. "The way he tried to play victim when he's the one who humiliated Tia Rosa." But Isabella wasn't celebrating with her brother and cousins. She was sitting on my couch, staring at her phone with an expression I didn't like. "Mija, you okay?" She looked up at me and I saw something dangerous in her eyes. "Mom, I have pictures. From when Ryan and I were together. Private pictures." The room went silent. My heart sank because I knew exactly where her mind was going. "Isabella, no," I said immediately. "That's not who we are." "They humiliated you in front of everyone," she said, her voice tight with anger. "They made you feel worthless. They need to know what real humiliation feels like." Carlos and Roberto exchanged glances. Miguel sat down beside his sister. "Isabella, I get it," he said carefully. "I wanted to tear those people apart tonight, but sharing those pictures, that's different. That's crossing a line we can't uncross." "He crossed a line first," Isabella shot back. "Did you see Mom's face at that wedding? Did you see how small they tried to make her feel?" I could see the pain in my daughter's eyes, the same pain I'd felt when I read that cruel note. But this wasn't the answer. "Mija, look at me." I waited until she met my eyes. "What they did was wrong, cruel, and inexcusable. But if you do this, you become someone I didn't raise, someone I don't recognize." For a moment, I thought I'd gotten through to her. She put her phone down and nodded. We all went to bed thinking the situation was under control. I was wrong. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing constantly. Texts, calls, notifications. Something was happening. "Mom!" Miguel burst into my room. "Isabella did it! She posted the pictures!" My blood went cold. I grabbed my phone and saw what my daughter had done in her anger and pain. Anonymous accounts on multiple social media platforms had shared intimate photos of Ryan, along with captions about entitled rich boys who think they're better than everyone else. I felt sick to my stomach. "Where is she?" I asked. "She left early for work," Miguel said. "Mom, this is bad. These pictures are everywhere." I spent the morning trying to reach Isabella, but she wouldn't answer her phone. When she finally came home that evening, I was waiting for her. "We need to talk," I said. Isabella looked defiant, but also ashamed. "I'm not sorry," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You should be," I replied. "What Ryan's family did was cruel and wrong, but this is vindictive and dangerous. You could go to jail for this, Isabella." "He deserved it," she muttered. "Maybe he did," I said, and that surprised her. Maybe he deserved to feel humiliated and small. But the woman I raised doesn't take revenge like this. The woman I raised fights back with dignity and strength, not by destroying someone's life and reputation in such a personal way. Isabella sat down heavily on the couch. "Mom, I was so angry when I saw what they did to you." "I know," I said, sitting beside her. "I know you did it out of love for me. But Mija, there are consequences for everything, and this is going to have consequences none of us are ready for." Miguel, who had been listening from the kitchen, came and sat with us. "The pictures are viral," he said quietly. "Local news is picking up the story. Ryan's going to be destroyed by this." That night, I lay awake wondering what my daughter had unleashed, and whether our family was ready for the storm that was coming. The next few days were a whirlwind of chaos that I wasn't prepared for. The story had taken on a life of its own. "Local wedding revenge scandal rocks high society" was the headline in our town's newspaper. I found myself at the center of a story I never wanted to be part of. Isabella had been avoiding me since our conversation, staying late at work and leaving early. When she finally came home on Wednesday night, I was ready for a real conversation. "Sit down, Mija," I said. "We need to talk about what you've done." She slumped into her chair like a teenager in trouble, not the grown woman she was supposed to be. Mom, I know you're disappointed in me. Disappointed doesn't begin to cover it, I said honestly. What you did was wrong, Isabella. Not just legally risky, but morally wrong. But they humiliated you first, she protested. Yes, they did. And it hurt. It hurt more than losing a job, more than your father leaving us, more than any physical pain I've ever felt. But what they did to me doesn't justify what you did to Ryan. Isabella looked up at me, confused. So, you're taking his side now? I'm not taking anyone's side, I said firmly. I'm trying to teach you the same lesson I've been teaching you your whole life, that being hurt doesn't give you the right to destroy someone else. The truth was, I was torn up inside. Part of me, the part that had felt so small and worthless at that wedding, felt a dark satisfaction knowing that Ryan was experiencing some of the humiliation I had felt. But the mother in me, the woman who had tried to raise Isabella with integrity, was horrified by what my pain had driven my daughter to do. I can't control what the rest of the family does, I continued. Miguel and Carlos and Roberto, they're adults, and they chose to confront Ryan's family in their own way. I may not have agreed with their methods, but at least they looked those people in the eye when they stood up for me. You think what I did was worse than what they did at the auction? Isabella asked. I think what you did was cowardly, I said, and watched her flinch. You hid behind anonymous accounts and destroyed someone's privacy and dignity from the shadows. That's not the woman I raised you to be. Isabella was quiet for a long moment. So what do you want me to do? The pictures are out there now. I can't take them back. I want you to face the consequences of your actions like an adult, I said. And I want you to understand that while I love you, and I understand why you did it, I can't pretend to approve of it. That's when she surprised me with a question I wasn't ready for. Mom, if you could go back to that wedding day, would you want me to handle it differently? I thought about it for a long time before answering. I would want you to stand up for me, which you did beautifully. I would want you to show Ryan and his family that their cruelty was unacceptable, which you did. But I would want you to do it in a way that let you look at yourself in the mirror afterward and be proud of the woman you are. And you think I can't do that now? Can you? I asked. When you think about those pictures of Ryan being shared by strangers, by people who don't even know what he did to us, can you honestly say you're proud of that decision? Isabella's shoulders sagged. No, she whispered. I felt good about it for maybe an hour. After that, it just felt dirty. That's your conscience talking, I said. That's the woman I raised, trying to get through to the hurt girl who just wanted to protect her mother. We sat in silence for a while, both of us processing everything that had happened. Finally, Isabella looked at me with tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, Mom. Not for defending you, but for the way I did it. I know, mija, I said. Now we have to figure out how to live with the consequences together. Life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. Thursday morning, I was having coffee and trying to figure out how to help Isabella navigate the mess she'd created when my phone rang. It was my sister Maria. Maria and I had always been different. While I went straight to work after high school, she'd managed to build a successful accounting firm over the years. She employed about 30 people and handled the books for several major businesses in town. We didn't talk as often as we should have. Rosa, her voice was tight with anger. Miguel told me what happened at Isabella's wedding. I sighed. Maria, I don't want this to become a bigger family issue than it already is. Too late for that, she said. Do you know where Ryan works? Actually, I did know. He was a junior partner at some real estate development firm downtown. I'd heard him mention it during the few family dinners we'd shared before the wedding. Why? I asked, though I was getting a sinking feeling. He works for Hartwell Development Corporation, Maria said. Ring any bells? It took me a second, but then it hit me. Hartwell, as in Richard Hartwell, Ryan's father. It's a family business, Maria continued. Richard owns it. Ryan works there. Probably half his relatives are on the payroll. Maria, what are you thinking? I'm thinking that company has been systematically undercutting my bids for the Riverside Mall renovation project, she said. For 6 months, they've been submitting proposals that are impossibly low. Below cost? Rosa. I've been documenting everything because I suspected they were either lying about their capabilities or hiding costs somewhere. What kind of documentation? Permit applications with false timeline estimates, subcontractor agreements that violate union contracts, environmental impact statements that don't match their actual plans. I've been building a case to present to the city planning board, but I wanted to handle it professionally. I felt my stomach tighten. And now? Now I'm thinking the city planning board needs to see this information immediately, she said, especially since they're about to award Hartwell Development the contract for the new civic center. And now I'm remembering that family comes first. Before I could protest, Maria had hung up. I tried calling her back, but she didn't answer. I had a feeling she was already making those phone calls she'd mentioned. I was right. By Friday afternoon, word was getting around town that Hartwell Development was under investigation by the City Planning Commission. By Monday morning, I heard through the grapevine that 2 major projects had been put on hold, citing concerns about permit compliance. Isabella came home from work looking shaken. "Mom, did you hear about Ryan's family's company?" "I heard," I said carefully. "Ryan got suspended today," she continued, along with his cousin and his uncle. Richard's scrambling to keep the business afloat. I felt that same conflicted emotion I'd been wrestling with all week. Part of me felt justice was being served, but another part of me wondered if we'd all gone too far. "How do you feel about that?" I asked Isabella. "Confused," she admitted. "A week ago, I would have said he deserved everything he got. But after our talk the other night, I don't know anymore." "That's called growing up," I said, realizing that feeling justified and being right aren't always the same thing. That evening, Maria called me back. "It's done," she said simply. "What's done?" "Hartwell Development just lost their biggest contract, the one for the new shopping center. Turns out the city doesn't appreciate working with companies under ethics investigation." "Maria, was this really necessary?" "Rosa," her voice softened, "I know you've spent your whole life being the better person, taking insults, turning the other cheek, working harder to prove your worth. But sometimes, people need to learn that actions have consequences. And what if this destroys innocent people along the way? Then maybe they should have thought about that before they decided to attack our family," Maria said firmly. "I'm not sorry for protecting you, Hermana, even if you can't protect yourself." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen thinking about how quickly everything had spiraled. A cruel joke at a wedding had triggered a chain reaction that was destroying lives and businesses. And while I couldn't deny a part of me felt vindicated, I was beginning to wonder if the cost of this vindication was worth it. Isabella found me there an hour later, still thinking, "Mom, you okay?" "Just wondering if we've all become people we don't recognize," I said honestly. Isabella sat down beside me. "Maybe we have, but maybe sometimes that's what it takes to make sure people don't think they can walk all over us." I looked at my daughter and saw both the woman I'd raised and the stranger she'd become in her anger. "Maybe," I said, "but I hope we can find our way back to who we really are." The scandal kept growing like a wildfire none of us could control. What started as Isabella's impulsive act of revenge had somehow become the talk of the entire town. The pictures she'd posted weren't just circulating on social media anymore. They'd made their way to local gossip websites, and people were sharing them with crude commentary that had nothing to do with our original conflict. I found myself in the uncomfortable position of watching someone I'd once considered family being destroyed in the most public and humiliating way possible. Ryan had disappeared from social media entirely. His LinkedIn profile was gone. People said he hadn't left his parents' house in days. The irony wasn't lost on me. A week and a half ago, I'd been the one hiding in shame, wanting to disappear from public view. Now our roles were completely reversed. "Mom, you need to see this," Miguel said, bursting into my house Wednesday morning with his laptop. "I don't think I want to," I said honestly. "No, you really do." He set the computer in front of me and showed me a local news article. The headline read, "Wedding humiliation leads to social media revenge scandal. Local family destroys former son-in-law's life." But it wasn't the headline that caught my attention. It was the comments section. Hundreds of people weighing in on our family drama, and most of them weren't taking our side. "Look at this one," Miguel pointed to a comment from someone called Working Mom 23. "Regardless of what happened at the wedding, sharing intimate photos is revenge porn and it's illegal. This family has gone way too far." Another comment from local teacher read, "The mother was wronged at the wedding, but destroying someone's career and reputation over a mean joke? This is overkill." I felt sick reading them. How did this get so out of hand? "Because Isabella posted those pictures," Miguel said bluntly. "Everything else we did, confronting them at the charity auction, Maria going after their business, people might have understood that, but the pictures changed everything. Now we look like the bullies." Isabella walked in just as I was closing the laptop. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in days. "I know what you're going to say," she started. "Do you?" I asked. "Because I'm not sure I know what to say anymore." "The pictures are everywhere now," she said quietly. "Sites I've never heard of. Forums, group chats. People are sharing them who don't even know what happened at the wedding. They just think they're funny. The weight of that hit me hard. Whatever cruel thing Ryan's family had done to me, it was contained to one evening, one room full of people. What Isabella had done to Ryan would follow him forever. Those images would never completely disappear from the internet. Mija, do you understand what you've done? I asked. This isn't just about revenge anymore. You've destroyed this boy's life permanently. He deserved it, Isabella said, but there was no conviction left in her voice. Did he deserve to have strangers commenting on his body? Did he deserve to have people he's never met sharing those pictures for entertainment? Did he deserve to lose his job and his reputation over something his mother wrote on a card? Isabella slumped against the wall. I just wanted them to hurt the way they hurt you. And now they do, I said. Ryan's life is ruined. His family's business is falling apart. They've been humiliated publicly. Congratulations, Mija. You got your revenge. How does it feel? Isabella couldn't answer my question, and honestly, I didn't expect her to. The silence in my living room was heavy with regret and consequences none of us had fully anticipated. But if I thought our family's response had been extreme, I was about to learn that desperate people do desperate things. It started with phone calls to the cleaning company where I worked nights. Anonymous callers claiming I was an unfit mother, that I'd raised a criminal, that the company shouldn't employ someone whose family destroys innocent people's lives. My supervisor, Mrs. Patterson, called me into her office Friday afternoon. Rosa, I've known you for 8 years, she said. You're one of the most reliable workers I've ever had. But these calls are getting out of hand. What kind of calls? I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. People saying you're dangerous, that your family are cyber criminals, that we're supporting predators by keeping you employed. Mrs. Patterson rubbed her temples. I know it's all garbage, but corporate is getting nervous about the attention. My stomach dropped. Are you firing me? Not yet, she said. But I need you to know that this situation is affecting more than just your family now. That evening, Miguel got a call from his daughter's school. Someone had contacted them claiming that he was distributing inappropriate material to minors. It was completely false, but the school had to investigate any report involving children. Carlos found his work truck vandalized in his driveway, the word predator scratched across the paint. Roberto got threatening messages on social media from accounts that appeared to be fake. They're fighting back, Isabella said when we all gathered at my house that weekend. Ryan's family and their friends are trying to destroy us the same way we destroyed them. Can you blame them? I asked. Look what we've done to their lives. They started it, Danny said angrily. They humiliated you first. And we finished it, I replied. Maybe too well. That's when Isabella's phone rang. She looked at the caller ID and went pale. It's the police, she said. We all went silent as she answered. I could only hear her side of the conversation, but it was enough. Yes, ma'am, I understand. Tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Yes, I'll have a lawyer. When she hung up, her hands were shaking. They want to question me about the pictures. Ryan's family filed charges for harassment and distribution of intimate images without consent. The room exploded into worried chatter, but I felt strangely calm. Maybe it was because I'd been expecting this moment since the night Isabella first posted those pictures. Good, I said, and everyone stopped talking. Good? Miguel asked. Mom, Isabella could go to jail. Isabella broke the law, I said simply. She needs to face the consequences. But they humiliated you first, Carlos protested. And that gave us the right to destroy their lives? I asked. Carlos, I love you for defending me. All of you. But look around. Look what we've become. We're getting threatening phone calls. My job is in jeopardy. Miguel's being investigated at school. Ryan's family is fighting back because we pushed them past their breaking point. Isabella looked at me with desperate eyes. Mom, what do I do? You tell the truth, I said. You explain why you did it. You take responsibility for your actions and you accept whatever consequences come. What if I go to prison? Then you go to prison, I said. And my heart broke saying it. Mija, I would rather visit you in jail knowing you're the woman I raised than have you free, and knowing you destroyed someone's life out of spite. The family looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again. I felt like the mother who had taught Isabella right from wrong, even when wrong felt satisfying. This ends now, I announced. No more retaliation, no more revenge, no more escalation. Whatever Ryan's family does to us from here on out, we take it with dignity. Even if they destroy our lives? Roberto asked. Especially then, I said, because that's who we are. Or at least it's who we're supposed to be. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Isabella hired a lawyer and was preparing for what looked like serious criminal charges. The local media had picked up the story, painting our family as vindictive bullies who had destroyed an innocent man's life over a wedding prank. Ryan's family wasn't done with us. Catherine Hartwell, despite her own business troubles, had hired a publicist to manage their image. Suddenly, Ryan was being portrayed as a victim of domestic abuse, a young man whose life had been destroyed by an unstable ex-partner and her enabler family. The narrative was effective. Ryan did interviews with local news stations, sitting in his parents' immaculate living room, looking fragile and traumatized. He talked about feeling unsafe, about having to seek therapy because the pictures had made him a target for harassment from strangers. "I made mistakes," he said in one particularly devastating interview. "My family and I were wrong to write that note about Isabella's mother. It was mean and inappropriate. But this response, having my most private moments shared with the world, no one deserves that." He was right, and watching him cry on television made me sick to my stomach. Whatever cruel thing he'd done to me, he didn't deserve what Isabella had done to him. The interview went viral. Suddenly, our local family drama was national news. Wedding revenge gone wrong was trending on social media. Legal experts were using Isabella's case as an example of how revenge porn laws were being strengthened across the country. My phone rang constantly with reporters wanting statements, people wanting to interview me about raising a daughter who would do such a thing. I stopped answering calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Work became unbearable. My coworkers tried to be supportive, but I could feel them watching me, whispering when they thought I couldn't hear. Some defended me, saying I'd been wronged first. Others clearly thought my family had gone too far. The breaking point came when Mrs. Patterson called me into her office again. "Rosa, I'm sorry," she said, not meeting my eyes. "The company's decided to let you go." "Because of Isabella's actions?" "Because of the attention," she said. "We're a small company. We can't handle this kind of publicity. Every client is asking questions, and it's affecting our ability to get new contracts. 15 years of loyal service ended because my daughter couldn't control her anger. I cleaned out my locker in silence while my coworkers pretended not to watch. That night, I came home to find Isabella waiting for me with papers in her hand. "Mom, Ryan's lawyer sent these," she said. "They're not just pursuing criminal charges, they're suing for damages. Emotional distress, lost wages, reputational harm. They want $250,000. I sat down heavily at my kitchen table. "Money we don't have." "Money I don't have," Isabella corrected. "This is my fault, not yours." "Your actions, my consequences," I said. "That's how family works, mija." Miguel arrived an hour later with more bad news. Danny had been fired from his construction job after someone had sent his employer details about our family situation. Carlos's contracting business was losing clients who didn't want to be associated with the controversy. "They're destroying us systematically," Miguel said. "Everything we did to them, they're doing back to us." "As they should," I said. "We taught them how to play this game." "So what do we do now?" Isabella asked. "We endure it," I said. "We accept the consequences of our choices, and we hope that someday we can rebuild what we've torn down." But I could see in Isabella's eyes that she was starting to understand the true cost of revenge. It wasn't just Ryan who had been destroyed. It was all of us. The woman who had humiliated me at a wedding had inadvertently taught my family that cruelty begets cruelty, that destruction spreads like wildfire, consuming everything in its path. The irony was bitter. In trying to defend my dignity, we had lost it entirely. In trying to prove we were better than people who looked down on us, we had become exactly what they thought we were. And the worst part was, I couldn't even be angry at Ryan's family anymore. They were just doing what we had taught them to do, fighting back with everything they had. 2 months after the wedding that started it all, I was sitting in my kitchen with a cup of coffee, scrolling through job listings on my phone when someone knocked on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and lately, unexpected visitors usually brought bad news. Through the peephole, I saw Ryan standing on my porch. He looked different, thinner, wearing a simple polo shirt instead of the designer clothes I remembered. But what struck me was his posture. He wasn't the broken man from the news interviews. But he wasn't the arrogant boy from the wedding either. I opened the door but kept the chain latched. "Ryan, Mrs. Martinez," he said formally. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, but I need to talk to you. Please." Something in his voice made me unlock the chain. He sat across from me at my kitchen table, the same table where Isabella had planned her revenge, where my family had plotted their response, where we'd received legal documents that were slowly dismantling our lives. "I'm dropping the charges against Isabella," he said directly. I studied his face carefully. Why? Because I've had 2 months to think about what happened, and I realize this cycle has to end somewhere, he said. What my family did to you was inexcusable. I should have torn up that card the moment I saw it. But you didn't. No, I didn't. I was a coward who wanted my family's approval more than I wanted to do the right thing. His voice was steady but pained. I let them treat you like you were beneath us. When the truth is, you raised a daughter who was too good for me. You're right, I said. It has. He looked surprised by my agreement. I expected you to defend your family. I've spent 3 months watching good people become cruel because they love me, I said. I've lost my job. My daughter might go to prison and my family's reputation is destroyed. All because some people thought it would be funny to humiliate me at a wedding. Ryan's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry about the note. I didn't write it, but I should have stopped it. I should have defended you. Why didn't you? Because I was young and stupid and wanted my family to like Isabella, he said honestly. I thought if I went along with their jokes, they'd accept her better. I never imagined it would hurt you so much. And I never imagined my family would hurt you so much in return. We sat quietly for a moment. I could hear the clock ticking on my wall, the same clock that had counted down the minutes of countless difficult conversations in this kitchen. I need you to know that Isabella has been trying to fix this, he continued. She's called my lawyer's office 14 times asking how she can make amends. She's spent her savings trying to get those pictures removed from every website she can find. She even wrote me a letter, 12 pages apologizing and explaining what that wedding day did to her. I hadn't known about the letter. She never told me. She's ashamed, Ryan said, not of defending you, but of how she did it. She knows she crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. After he left, I sat alone thinking about forgiveness and consequences, about how pain can make good people do terrible things, and how sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose to stop the cycle. When Isabella came home from work an hour later, I told her about Ryan's visit. He's dropping the charges, I said. The relief on her face was immediate, followed quickly by something that looked like guilt. Why would he do that? Because he understands something we're all learning, I said. That revenge doesn't heal anything. It just spreads the pain around until everyone's infected with it. Because he's a better person than any of us gave him credit for, I said. And because he understands that revenge just keeps spreading until everyone's destroyed. Isabella sat down and put her head in her hands. Mom, I've ruined everything. Your job, our family's reputation, Ryan's life. Yes, I said simply. You have. She looked up at me, surprised by my bluntness. But you also learned from it, I continued. And you've been trying to make it right, even when you thought no one was watching. That tells me the woman I raised is still in there. What happens now? Now we rebuild, I said. Slowly, carefully, and with a lot more wisdom than we had before. 1 year later, I'm sitting in the same kitchen, but everything has changed. The woman writing this story bears little resemblance to the one who walked into that country club feeling invisible and unwanted. Isabella never faced prison time. When Ryan dropped the charges, the prosecutor's office decided the case wasn't worth pursuing without a victim's cooperation. She found work at a nonprofit organization that helps families navigate social services, work that uses her experience with both privilege and struggle. She calls me every week, and slowly, we've rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of hard-earned wisdom rather than just love. Ryan relocated to Portland and now works for a legal aid clinic specializing in privacy rights and online harassment cases. I heard he's doing well, though we maintain no contact by mutual agreement. Sometimes healing requires distance. The men in my family learned different lessons. Miguel channels his protective instincts into coaching community center boxing, teaching kids that strength comes from discipline, not anger. Carlos rebuilt his contracting business with a focus on affordable housing projects, using his skills to help families like ours rather than just chasing bigger profits. Roberto found work as a substance abuse counselor, his own past struggles finally becoming a source of wisdom rather than shame. Maria's accounting firm survived the controversy, though she lost the Civic Center contract when the city chose a different developer entirely. She's learned to separate business competition from family loyalty, a lesson that's made her both more successful and more ethical. Catherine Hartwell started volunteering at a literacy program for working adults after losing several major social connections. Whether genuine or calculated, her newfound interest in understanding different perspectives has actually helped real people learn to read. As for me, I found work with a family who needed a live-in caregiver for their elderly mother. The pay is modest, but they treat me with respect, and I've discovered I have a talent for this work. More importantly, I've learned that dignity isn't something others can take from you. It's something you give away. The lesson that emerged from our family's temporary descent into revenge is this: being wronged doesn't automatically make your response right. Ryan's family was cruel, elitist, and everything I disliked about people who mistake inherited wealth for inherent worth. But that didn't give us the right to systematically destroy their lives. We all became strangers to ourselves because we let justified hurt transform into something toxic. That note at my place card was mean and unnecessary, but it was ultimately just words on paper, while our response had lasting consequences for real people. If I could return to that wedding day, I would still want Isabella to defend me. I would still want my family to stand up for what's right, but I would want us to do it without losing ourselves in the process, without becoming the very thing we claim to oppose. We proved that working-class people aren't pushovers, but the victory felt hollow because we'd compromised our values to achieve it. The real triumph came later, in choosing to rebuild rather than continue destroying, in learning when to stop fighting. Today, I'm proud of the woman I raised, not because she destroyed someone who hurt me, but because she learned from her mistakes and chose to become better. I'm proud of my family, not for their capacity for revenge, but for their eventual capacity for wisdom. And I'm proud of myself, not because I was defended, but because I finally understood that the strongest response to cruelty is often grace. The wedding card called me a fake and uneducated mother. For a few months, in my pain and fury, maybe I was fake, pretending that revenge could heal wounds, that destruction could build anything worthwhile. But the woman writing this story today is the mother I always aspired to be. Flawed, human, but ultimately decent. And that's worth more than any revenge could ever be. What happened to your child that made you realize nuclear was the only option? When my daughter was 13, she suddenly became extremely excited about going to school. This was the same girl who 2 weeks ago tried to play dead to skip class. So naturally, I asked her why the change. Oh, I now have Mr. Davidson for history every day. His class is super fun. I smiled, glad she was finally not hating school. I didn't think much about it again until a week later, when Emma started setting her alarm 30 minutes earlier just to pick out the perfect cutscene outfit. It's not like Emma never cared about her appearance, but she was always fine with just throwing the first clean thing on. I remember asking her if she was trying to impress a boy she had a crush on, and her face went totally red. "Don't say that, Mom," she yelled. That's when I got truly suspicious. I started looking at her normal teenage mood swings more carefully, and I realized they were always related to Mr. Davidson. She'd never admit it, but I noticed things like, if Mr. Davidson complimented her project, she'd float around the house for hours. But if Mr. Davidson didn't acknowledge her much that day, she'd barely speak and pick at her plate during dinner. That's when I tested her in a subtle manner. "I was thinking of moving you out of Mr. Davidson's class. I think it would be good to—" "You can't do that!" she yelled before I could even get my words out. I stared at her blankly. "But why not?" I asked. Silence. Deafening silence. She didn't say a word, just stood up and beelined straight for her room, pulling up her phone to text someone before she even reached the stairs. This was Emma, my girl who just 2 months ago didn't care about a single school-related thing. She was always extremely open about everything too, so this was a huge problem. That night, I crept into her room and searched through her phone. I know this was a huge violation of privacy, but I truly felt like I had no choice. I had a gut feeling she was in danger. I combed through every messaging app I could find, looking for anything at all related to Mr. Davidson. And that's when I found it. An email thread on a backup email she had made seemingly specifically for communicating with him. The last email from him read, "Can't wait to see you during my free period tomorrow." My hands started shaking as I opened the thread, and what I read made me want to throw up. Mr. Davidson was telling my 13-year-old daughter that she was mature for her age and special, and that their connection transcended normal student-teacher relationships. He sent her photos of gifts he'd give to her, and she'd tell him she was hiding them in her bag. I quietly went through her bag as soon as I read it, and that's when I saw it. Expensive professional makeup, mature outfits, stockings, all as gifts from Mr. Davidson. I wanted to puke. What do you even do when you realize your daughter is being groomed? The first thing I did was take pictures of everything with my own phone while trying not to scream. My first instinct was to tell the school, tell the police, tell someone, but I knew I couldn't, because Mr. Davidson wasn't just any regular teacher. Mr. Davidson's parents donated a lot to the school. His brother was the police chief who'd just spoken at our PTA meeting about protecting children. His wife was on the school board. If I went to the authorities, they likely wouldn't take me seriously, maybe even destroy me. And so I did the only thing I could think of. I started documenting everything while pretending everything was normal. I began volunteering at school without Emma knowing and watched how he interacted with her. I took photos of the gifts and backed up the emails to different clouds. I started watching documentaries with Emma about consent and talking about news stories where teachers hurt students. I could see the hamster wheel in her head turning as we watched these. She'd often excuse herself midway through, fidget nervously, bite her fingernails. She was finally realizing the truth of what was happening. Unfortunately, this progress was cut short by what is now the worst day of my life, Tuesday. Emma came home from school early saying, "I saw him, Mom," she said. "I saw him do with another girl exactly what he did with me." She took a deep breath, as if the truth still hurt coming out. At recess, "Mr. Davidson," he talked to her. Exactly the same way. The same words. "You're special. Different from the others. I love talking to you." He said this looking into her eyes. He touched her shoulder, like he did with me. My mouth went dry. And the worst part, she continued, her voice breaking, is that he looked at me afterward, as if nothing had happened, as if I were invisible, as if everything he said was just rehearsal. My heart tightened. I knew. Deep down, I always knew. But hearing it from my daughter's mouth, seeing her face imploding, was like taking a punch to the stomach. "Emma, you're not to blame for anything. None of this is your fault, okay?" I said, holding her hands. "I thought he cared about me, Mom," she said. "I thought that I was important, that he really saw me." She closed her eyes tightly, as if trying to erase the last few months from memory. "He said he wanted to meet me today, after class, that he had a special gift for me. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't going to go, but now I see. He lied to me the whole time." I froze. This was no longer a supposition. It wasn't just suspicious messages or behavioral changes. It was direct confirmation. He was trying to isolate my daughter, use gifts, words, and promises to prepare something that she, innocent as she was, hadn't yet named. But I knew the name, and it was disgusting. I hugged my daughter tightly, swallowing the scream that threatened to escape my throat. She trembled, but didn't cry anymore. She seemed empty. "You won't go through this alone anymore," I whispered in her ear. "I promise. I'll take care of you. And he'll never come close again. Never again." She nodded, saying nothing, and fell asleep right there, exhausted. I covered her with a blanket, got up, and closed the living room door. I knew that from that moment, my life would be different. I couldn't wait anymore. Or trust in protocols. I needed to act. Now. But to act, I needed proof. And the next step would be even more difficult. That night, when Emma finally fell asleep, I sat in the dark for long minutes, staring at nothing. My heart was restless. I knew I couldn't simply sleep and pretend that all of this would pass with a conversation or blocking his phone. This wasn't a teenage fight. It was serious. Too serious. And I needed proof. I needed to show, clearly, who he really was. Even to her. I went to Emma's room, took a deep breath, and carefully picked up her phone. I knew the password. I never needed to use it without permission, but that was more than permitted. It was necessary. I opened the messaging app and went straight to the history with Mr. Davidson. The latest messages were there, intact. He called her my smart girl, said she had a different glow, that the way she saw the world was unique for someone so young. The words seemed gentle at first glance, almost like common encouragement. But they weren't. Not when added to the context. Not when I knew what he was doing. I replied carefully, pretending to be her. "Hi. You said you had a special gift. What is it?" His response came in seconds, as if he were waiting. "You'll love it. I chose it with care. But I'll only show you if you promise not to tell anyone. It's just ours, okay?" I swallowed hard. I continued. "Where are we going to meet?" He sent the address of a remote park, late in the afternoon the next day. Said it was safer there. Added a winking emoji. And then wrote, "Bring that black purse you used last week. You look beautiful in it." At that moment, my body froze. This wasn't just an innocent conversation. It wasn't just a teacher crossing boundaries with words. He was planning. He was confident. This wasn't the first time he had done something like this. You could tell by the way he wrote, as if he knew exactly how to manipulate. I continued the dialogue, maintaining the pose of a curious and anxious girl. He began to speak more openly. Said he had been waiting for this moment for a long time, that it was difficult to restrain himself in classes, and that she needed to understand that their bond was too special to fit within the school. He used words like true connection, secret friendship, freedom to be who we are. I read each sentence as if it had a blade piercing my chest. I took screenshots, copied the messages, saved everything in more than one place. My whole body trembled, but I knew I needed to maintain control. He thought he was in command, that no one would ever challenge him, that he was untouchable. I closed the app, dropped the phone on the couch, and put my hands on my head. I breathed deeply several times. I cried silently. Because, at that instant, it really hit me. If I didn't do something, no one would. Could I go to the school? They would probably silence me. His parents were donors to the institution, his wife was part of the board, his brother was the local police chief. I wasn't stupid. I had seen similar stories before. And they all ended with the victim being discredited and the predator transferred to another school with a clean record. But with me, it would be different. If the system was rotten, then I would create my own. And at that instant, I opened the browser and typed with trembling fingers, how to report online predators without involving local authorities. I spent hours that dawn immersed in websites, forums, videos. Each link I clicked led me to another case, another story, another muffled cry for help. It was scary to realize how much more common this was than imagined. And worse, how so many powerful people were capable of silencing everything with a wave, a donation, or an influential surname. But it was on Instagram that I found something that caught my attention. A video with the title, "We Caught Him Live. He'll Never Approach Anyone Again." It was from a page with thousands of followers that confronted people who posed as teenagers to attract adults with bad intentions. They filmed everything, brought evidence, and only then called the police, with everything documented. I watched one, then another, then another. The pattern was the same. They assumed the victim's profile, arranged a meeting in a public place, showed up with cameras and evidence, and directly confronted the aggressor. There was no screaming, no lynching. It was strategy, control, exposure. That was exactly what I needed. I contacted the profile, not expecting an immediate response. I explained everything, that I was a mother, that I already had screenshots of the messages, the meeting address, time, everything. I sent screenshots, reported the history. I made sure to be clear and objective. I ended with a sentence that hurt to write, but was true. If I don't do something now, he'll do it to another child, maybe worse. It took time, an hour, maybe two. And then came the response. "We've read everything. It's serious, very serious. We're going to help you." My eyes filled with tears, this time of relief. They called me for a video call at that same instant. It was a group of 4 people, all with firm but respectful voices. They explained how it would work. They would take over the conversation with Mr. Davidson, maintaining Emma's profile. They would play his game until the right moment. We would arrange the meeting in a busy park, preferably on a Saturday, where there would be witnesses and natural security. Everything would be recorded from at least 3 different angles. And in the end, the police would be called with everything ready. Evidence, location, time, history. But what if he leaves? What if he runs? We prevent it. We're not violent, but we're not stupid either. We have practice. We know how to handle it. And you won't need to get involved. Just tell us where you'll feel safe. They conveyed confidence, seriousness. Nothing like those sensationalist pages that make scandals to get likes. These were people who wanted to prevent more children from being victims. I said I would agree. Of course I agreed. But the truth is that inside I was panicking. The risk, the exposure, the tension that something could go wrong. It was a difficult weight to bear. But then I looked at Emma's phone, still on the table, and remembered what I read in the messages. Everything he had said. How she believed she was special. She was special. Not because of him, but for being who she is, for being my daughter. And no one had the right to play with that. We set the trap for Saturday, 3 days later. The group asked me to stay distant, watching from afar, so that Emma wouldn't be at risk and Davidson wouldn't notice anything strange. They would take care of everything. That night, I didn't sleep a minute. I sat next to my daughter's bed and stayed there, listening to her peaceful breathing. I fixed her hair strands, like I did when she was a baby. And I promised silently, he will never touch you again, not even with words. Never again. Saturday dawned with a strange silence. Emma was still sleeping, and I had been awake for hours. I showered, changed clothes, and left with some excuse. Said I was going to the market, that I'd be back quickly. She believed it. She had no way of imagining what was about to happen. I arrived at the park half an hour before the agreed time. I parked far away, enough not to be seen. The group was already there, discreetly spread out. One of them was adjusting the tripod of a camera hidden among the bushes. Another was pretending to take photos of the landscape with his phone. The third was eating a sandwich on a wooden bench, wearing sunglasses, observing everything. And the last one was disguised as a common teenager, using his phone, pretending to be the Emma that Davidson was about to meet. I positioned myself behind a tree, nervous, sweaty hands, shaky legs, and then he appeared. Along the gravel path, coming with an almost bouncing step, there he was. Mr. Davidson, light polo shirt, pressed jeans, new sneakers. He even seemed happy, relaxed, as if this were just any walk, as if meeting a student outside of school were the most normal thing in the world. He approached the disguised young man, who continued looking at his phone. "Hi," he said with the voice I already recognized from afar. It was at that instant that the group moved. 3 of them surrounded Davidson in silence, like closing a trap with perfection. The one with the camera approached from behind, already recording everything. "Mr. Davidson," said one of them firmly, "we know why you're here." He stopped, not understanding. He looked around, confused. "Excuse me? Who are you?" "We're people who protect children, and we have everything you wrote to a 13-year-old girl thinking she would be here today." At that moment, he turned pale. "This is a misunderstanding," he murmured. "I didn't do anything. This is a setup." "Then why did you arrange this meeting?" The other shot back. "Why did you bring this gift?" and pointed to the bag in his hand. Davidson began to sweat. He tried to laugh, disguise, say it was a joke, that everything was misinterpreted. But they continued talking, showing the screenshots, reading excerpts from the messages, phrases he had written, words he used to manipulate. He began to back away, to walk backwards. "I'm going to call a lawyer. This is illegal. You can't—" "What's illegal is what you were doing with a minor, Mr. Davidson." That's when he turned his back and tried to run. But he couldn't. 2 of the young men reached him quickly. One held him by the arm, the other blocked the front. He lost his balance and fell sitting on the grass, dirty, panting, and completely exposed. "Don't touch me!" he screamed. But by this time, several people in the park were already looking. Some were filming with their own phones. Others were whispering. The truth was spreading before everyone's eyes. "We have everything recorded, everything saved, and we've already called the police," said the group leader, showing his phone. Davidson still tried to get up, but someone, perhaps by reflex, pushed him back. Not with excessive violence, but firmly. He fell again, this time with a dry slap to the face, given by one of the vigilantes, who looked at the camera right after and said, "This is for what you tried to do to this woman's daughter." My heart froze. I was there, a few meters away, and everyone knew who the girl's mother was. No one looked at me directly, but I felt seen, represented, avenged. When the patrol car arrived, everything happened quickly. The police officers got out in a hurry. One of them had already seen the video broadcast live and said that was enough to take him in custody. Davidson tried to explain, tried to justify himself, but there was nowhere to run. He was handcuffed right there, in front of everyone. As they took him away, he looked back, scared, lost, ashamed, and for a brief moment, I almost felt sorry. Almost. But then I remembered my daughter's expression when she realized she had been deceived. The way she cried, as if her world had shattered, and any feeling of pity evaporated. That night, back home, I sat on the couch with Emma and hugged her. She didn't know everything yet, but she could tell from my look that something had changed, and for the first time in a long time, she slept with her room at peace. Davidson's arrest wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The following Monday, I received a call from the detective responsible for the case. The search and seizure at his apartment had already been completed, and the content they found, well, he didn't even need to describe it. The pause in his voice said everything. But what he told me afterward confirmed what I already feared. Davidson wasn't doing this only with my daughter. They found message exchanges with at least 4 more teenagers of the same age. Some archived conversations, others deleted but recovered. Photos, audios, small videos. He had built a secret routine, acting calmly, using the same methods, the same sweet words, the same expensive gifts. And the worst part, he had been doing this for years. When the video of the confrontation in the park was officially published by the group, with proper protection blurs and explanations about the case, it exploded. It went viral in a matter of hours. And with it came the comments, the messages, the reports. One mother wrote, "This man was my daughter's teacher in 2020. She was 12 years old. Now everything makes sense." Another, even more direct. He gave my daughter a lipstick in secret. I thought it was strange, but the school said it was kindness. Today, I'm in shock. Dozens came, maybe more than 100. Some old, others current, all keeping the same feeling. Something was wrong, but no one knew how to act. No one had proof, until now. The formal complaint happened 2 days later. The prosecution filed for preventive detention, and it didn't take long for the sentence to arrive as well. His name was removed from the school's staff roster. His image disappeared from the exemplary educator's wall. But now, everyone knew. Davidson was sentenced to a long term, without the possibility of appealing in freedom. The video, the screenshots, the reports, everything added up to a solid, irrefutable process. Meanwhile, Emma changed. At first, the trauma still visited her in long silences and sporadic nightmares. But with the psychological support we sought, she began to understand that she wasn't to blame for anything, that she was manipulated by someone who used his position to hide, and that her courage, telling me everything, saved not only herself, but other girls too. She regained confidence gradually. She went back to drawing. She went back to speaking with enthusiasm. And one day she told me a sentence that broke me inside. "Mom, I think I want to use what happened to me to help other girls, so they don't feel silly like I felt." I hugged her so tightly that I ran out of air. She was no longer just my daughter. She was a survivor, a voice, a light for others who might still be in the dark. Nowadays, we are both invited to conversation circles in schools, not to tell names or expose details, but to teach, to alert, to remind people that danger sometimes wears a tie, says good morning in the hallway, and pretends to teach. The community changed too. The school implemented new protocols. Teachers began to be more supervised. Parents started paying more attention. And most importantly, children began to be heard. For real. And even with the scars, even with everything that could have been avoided, today I can say with a firm chest, we won. And Davidson will never have the chance to deceive anyone again, not with the whole world watching. Sometimes I find myself sitting on the porch, looking at the evening sky, and remembering everything that happened as if it were an unresolved nightmare. But then Emma appears laughing with some book in her hands, or calls me to see an illustration she drew herself, and I remember, it wasn't a nightmare. It was real. And still, we survived. But no one came out of it the same. Emma, for example, is a different girl now. She remains sweet, but not naive. She learned with a hardness I never wanted her to face that the world can be dangerous even where it should be safe. But she also discovered something more, that she is strong, that her voice matters, and that when it's heard, it can change other people's lives. She still goes to therapy, not because she's broken, but because she knows that taking care of the mind is as important as taking care of the body. Sometimes, on some quieter nights, she still gets restless, tosses and turns in bed, but they're increasingly rare. And today, she looks me in the eyes with firmness. She knows what she wants. She knows she deserves respect, and she doesn't accept less than that. She signed up for a support group for girls who went through similar experiences. She's been giving talks in schools, even at her young age, and she told me the other day, "Mom, I'll never again think that staying quiet is easier. That's worth more than any diploma." Me? Well, I changed too. I was never the combative type. I was always more the type who resolves things through dialogue, patience. But when it comes to protecting a child, you discover strengths you didn't know you had. Today, I'm active in educational campaigns. I help other parents identify early signs of manipulation and abuse. And above all, I'm a mother who learned to listen. With my eyes. With my heart. For a long time, I blamed myself for not noticing earlier. But today, I understand that guilt doesn't build. Vigilance does. And attentive love saves. Mr. Davidson, well, his name became synonymous with warning. He serves his sentence in a closed regime with no forecast for reduction. The lawyers tried everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. Besides our case, 4 other families formalized complaints. One of them revealed that they had tried to warn the school years ago, but were ignored. Now, everything came to light. The last news I had of him was during the final trial, when he tried to make a speech saying he was misunderstood. The prosecutor simply replied, "You were understood perfectly. That's why you're here." And there ended the career, reputation, and disguise he had used for so long. The vigilantes, well, they continue with their work. The video of Emma's case was the one that went most viral on their profile to date. Millions of views, interview invitations, But more important than fame was the impact. They received support from NGOs, psychologists, child protection councils. They improved their methods. They created partnerships with cybercrime departments. And they know they can't take justice into their own hands, but they can expose what needs to be seen. They sent me a message recently. Your daughter saved lives, and so did you. The other girls. Well, each story is a universe. Some were already away from school. Others were still trapped by fear, doubt, trauma. But the exposure of the case made them receive real support. Therapy, legal support, qualified listening. Some mothers came to me, emotional, saying, "You gave us courage to speak." There's no prize in the world that pays for that. The school, of course, went into crisis. They tried to deny at first. Then they tried to minimize. But the public pressure was too great. The board was replaced. Protection protocols were updated. Today, there are cameras in hallways, training to identify suspicious behavior, and a new policy of active listening for students. I still distrust some internal intentions, but at least now, they know they're being watched. And as for the community, it woke up. People began to look at their own children with more attention, to ask questions that before seemed exaggerated, to understand that abuse doesn't always have an ugly face or a rough voice. Sometimes it comes disguised as a compliment, a gift, a special friendship. And finally, to myself, I learned to trust again. Not in the system, not in authorities, but in myself. Because I did what was right, even when it was difficult. And because my daughter looked at me in the middle of chaos and saw a safe harbor. She survived. We survived. And if there's someone listening to this now, afraid, with doubts, thinking they won't be able to handle it, I tell you, you can. You're not alone. And yes, you can do something, even if it seems small, even if no one believes at first, because all it takes is one determined mother, one complaint made at the right time, one truth exposed with courage, to change everything. This was our story, but I hope, from the bottom of my heart, that no other mother needs to tell a similar one. Never again. My sister destroyed my relationship because she couldn't have her one true love, so I made her watch him fall for me instead. My younger sister, Mia, has been using the same excuse since she turned 21. She can't have her one true love, so she's entitled to destroy everyone else's. And I don't mean that in the cute, she's still hung up on her ex kind of way. I mean it like, if you're happy, she'll find a way to make you miserable, then blame it on her tragic love story, the one true love. Some guy named Ethan she met at a college party 4 years ago. They hooked up once, he never called, and somehow that became her origin story for being a piece of shit. It started with her best friend since kindergarten, Jess. One weekend, Mia stayed over at Jess's place. And by Monday, Jess's boyfriend was sending Mia good morning texts. When Jess found them together in her own bed, Mia actually said, "You don't understand what it's like to lose your soulmate." Jess never spoke to her again. Then came our cousin's engagement party. Mia showed up in a dress that cost more than my rent, got wine drunk, and cornered the groom in the bathroom. His exact words later, she kept saying I reminded her of someone special. Thank God he pushed her off and told his fiancé immediately. But Mia? She cried to our parents about how seeing happy couples triggered her trauma. Mom bought her a spa weekend to help her heal. By the time I met Ryan, I knew the drill. I kept him away from family dinners, deleted Mia from my social media, and told him my sister was going through something and needed space. For 2 years, it worked. We got engaged last spring. Small ceremony planned, nothing fancy, just us and close friends. I made one mistake, though. I mentioned it at Mom's birthday dinner. Mia's eyes lit up like Christmas came early. "I'm so happy for you," she said while hugging me. "When do I get to meet him?" A week later, Ryan showed me his phone laughing. "Your sister found me on Instagram with some fake account. Look at these messages." We read them together, mocking her desperation, and then he promised to block her. Well, 3 weeks before my wedding, I had the flu. Bad. Ryan was supposed to be at his brother's golf tournament for the day, but my friend lived near Mia's apartment complex and texted me to come over since I was already at my sister's. What? She said she'd seen Ryan's Tesla in the visitor spot. My chest went cold. I drove over, fever and all, and used the spare key Mia had given me for emergencies. I found them on her couch, her head in his lap, his hand in her hair, both half-dressed. She looked up at me with those fake tears already forming. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "He just reminds me so much of Ethan," and I stormed out. He didn't even try to save what we had. That's when I decided she'd learn what losing really feels like. See, Ethan wasn't some mystery man who just vanished. We'd actually been following each other on Instagram for 3 years. We had mutual friends from college, The occasional like on each other's posts, but never really talked. He lived 3 hours away, worked as a physical therapist, and posted videos of his golden retriever. So I split into his DMS with a simple message. Hey, this is weird, but my sister had a thing for you in college and just ruined my wedding. Want to help me ruin her life? He responded in 12 minutes. Mia, the girl who showed up at my mom's house? I'm in. Turns out she'd driven to his hometown, introduced herself to Ethan's mother as if she were an old acquaintance, telling a distorted story about how he was the love of her life, how they had been separated by circumstances. His poor mother believed it. She invited Mia for tea, they took selfies together, and she even posted saying, "Reuniting with my dear future mother-in-law." Ethan sent me everything, screenshots, videos, and even an audio of his mother saying, "She seemed so sincere, dear. I'm sorry if I caused any problems." That's when I knew. Mia wasn't going to stop. She didn't know how to love, only how to possess. And what she couldn't have, she destroyed. But this time, she didn't count on 2 things. That I was no longer that sister who let things slide, and that Ethan was willing to play the game. We planned every step. He would come visit me on the weekend of the family lunch. I hadn't spoken to Mia since I caught her with Ryan, but I knew she'd be there, because it was my father's birthday and no one ever missed the perfect family event. And me? I would show up with Ethan, holding hands, laughing, acting exactly how she dreamed of acting with him. On Friday, I picked up Ethan at the bus station. He was even more handsome in person. Charismatic, funny, gentle. The kind of man who shines effortlessly. The kind of man Mia couldn't manipulate. And he knew it. In the car, we rehearsed our lines, coordinated our gestures. And on Saturday, at 1 p.m., we parked in front of my parents' house. I walked in wearing a new dress, high heels, and a smile on my face. Ethan held my hand as if we'd been a couple in love for years. Mia was in the living room, laughing with my uncle when she saw us. Her laughter died in her throat. "Everyone," I announced, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "This is Ethan." The name hit her like lightning. She went white, then red, then forced herself to smile as if it were funny. "Ethan," she said, forcing an awkward laugh. "Wow, what a coincidence." He smiled politely. "Hi, Mia. Good to see you again." That destroyed any control she still pretended to have. She stammered something, but I was already sitting down with him beside me, taking photos, posting stories. My every move was a blade to her vanity. During lunch, she tried to make conversation with him, reminisce about something from college that never actually existed. But Ethan made sure to look at me the whole time, call me love, put his arm around my shoulders. And every time he did that, Mia pressed her lips together as if she were swallowing glass shards. After the birthday toast, she finally couldn't take it. She locked herself in the bathroom. I followed her. I knocked on the door until she opened it. "What do you want now?" she asked with smeared makeup and a pleading look. "Just came to see if you're okay," I replied with fake concern. "After all, it must be hard to see a soulmate in your sister's arms, right? You're doing this just to hurt me, and you destroyed my engagement just because you couldn't stand to see me happy. So no, Mia, this here is just justice. He was mine," she screamed, punching the wall. "I saw him first. I felt it first. No, Mia, you saw him once, and he never wanted you. You invented a love story in your head and used that as an excuse to be cruel to everyone around you. But now, you're going to sit and watch him love me. Because unlike you, I didn't have to beg." She collapsed on the floor, crying loudly. Mom knocked on the door, asking if everything was okay. I opened it and walked out with my head held high. I went back to the living room and sat next to Ethan. He kissed my forehead and whispered, "She's going to lose it even more. Are you ready?" I smiled. I've never been more ready. The next day, the repercussions were already visible. Mom called me early, asking for empathy. She said Mia had spent the entire night crying, that she was fragile, and that I should have avoided provoking her. "Provoking?" I asked, laughing humorlessly. "You think showing up with my boyfriend at a family gathering is provoking? Or is it that Mia just can't stand to see anyone happy without her being the center of attention?" She sighed on the other end of the line, as if I were the problem. "Honey, your sister has a sensitive heart. She gets attached easily." "Sensitive?" I interrupted. "Mom, she slept with my fiancé. She destroyed my wedding. And you're worried about her feelings?" I was feverish, alone at home, and she was lying with him on the couch, remembering Ethan. "You're not going to flip this around. Look, let's talk another day." And she hung up. At that moment, I realized no one there was going to defend me. The whole family always treated Mia like a broken ornament, but they forget she also has claws. She always had them. Only now those claws were turned on herself. On Monday, Ethan was still in town. I decided to take him to brunch with some of my friends, those who knew everything Mia had been up to since high school. He was a showstopper, polite, gentle, charismatic, and completely devoted to me. The girls exchanged glances, enchanted. Some even whispered things like, "This revenge is too beautiful." But the best part came in the afternoon. Ethan posted a photo of us on Instagram. The two of us hugging in a park, simple caption, "Sometimes love appears when you least expect it." The comments started discreetly. A cousin, a former classmate, heart emojis, but then Mia showed up. Kmia.soulmate commented, "This is disgusting. You know what he means to me." Ethan liked her comment and replied, with surgical precision, "We hooked up once, Mia. Once. And you followed me down the street the next day. That's not love, it's obsession." Boom. In less than an hour, the post became a topic in our social circles. People who had known Mia since high school started commenting things like, "Finally, someone said it." I always thought the way she talked about him was strange. Karma exists. She stayed silent on the post, but sent me a series of voice messages on WhatsApp, crying, screaming, asking how I could use him against her. One of the voice messages ended with, "You're destroying my life for revenge." I replied with a simple text, "No, I'm just showing how to rebuild after being destroyed, something you never knew how to do." And then, without any ceremony, I blocked her. But I still wasn't finished. Not yet. I knew she wouldn't let it go easily. And sure enough, on Thursday night, I got a notification. Mia had made a post on Instagram. A selfie with a crying face, swollen eyes, that low bedroom lighting. And the caption, "It's hard to see your sister steal the man you love. Laugh at your pain and be applauded for it. I'm not perfect, but no one deserves this." Over 1,000 likes. People commenting, "Stay strong, take care. You'll get through this." And what hurt the most? Some people close to me reposted it. The next morning, I went to my parents' house. Mom answered the door, surprised. "What are you doing here?" I came to talk with everyone. I walked in. Dad was in the living room. Mia came down the stairs as if she were at a funeral, in sweatpants, hair tied back, that "I'm the victim" face. "Did something happen?" she asked, almost sweetly. "Something did happen. Enough of you manipulating everyone and coming out like you're the poor victim." I stopped in the center of the living room, looked at both of them. "Mom, Dad, did you see the post? Do you really think it's fair? Do you remember who destroyed whose engagement? Honey, this isn't how you solve." Mom tried. "No, now you're going to listen." I turned to Mia. "You seduced Ryan. You stabbed me in the back. You said sorry with fake tears and thought you'd continue being the family princess. But now the tables have turned. Now you're the one on the ground, crying. And no one's going to save you this time. Because it's not a sad post that will erase the screenshots, the voice messages, the testimonies. Everyone saw who you really are." The mask fell. Mia, she stayed silent, crying. Dad looked down. "I'm tired of being the forgotten daughter while you put on little shows. Enough. The stage is mine now. And the audience? They're on my side." I left without waiting for an answer. In the car, Ethan was behind the wheel, with the radio on and a coffee for me in the cup holder. "So?" he asked. "It was beautiful," I replied. "She finally saw that she has no control anymore." He smiled. "You know what? Getting revenge on her was more therapeutic than I imagined." "Yeah. And you know what's better?" "What?" "Part 2 is still coming." Part 2 began with an invitation. The launch party for my friend Andre's new restaurant, a chef known around here, with local influencer presence and lots of social media coverage. Mia, of course, was obsessed with this type of event. She always pretended to have a life she didn't. Posted photos in store mirrors, pretending to own the clothes. Ordered expensive food to take photos and return it through the back door. That was it. Appearances. But this time she wasn't on the list. I was. And so was Ethan. We arrived on the right foot. Literally. The entrance photographer stopped us to take photos, and one of them appeared on a city events profile with the caption, "Couple of the moment. Melissa and Ethan steal the scene at the opening night." Mia saw that the next day. Of course. Posted on her stories the classic indirect. Some people need the spotlight to feel alive. I prefer depth. Depth? From who? From someone who threw herself at my fiancé's lap 3 weeks before the wedding and was now crying on the internet because the guy she barely knew became my boyfriend? The following Saturday, another event. Amanda's wedding. our cousin. Mia had always been very close to Amanda. She probably expected her friend to neutralize the situation and ask me not to bring Ethan. But Amanda called me personally. Mel, please come and bring him. Everyone already knows what happened, and I don't have patience to pretend anymore with Mia. She needs to learn that the world doesn't revolve around her. Mia was there, alone, dressed too tight, flawless makeup, plasticized smile, pretending she didn't see us when we walked in. Ethan hugged me by the waist, kissed my cheek from time to time, and all she could do was watch. But the scene that made the night worthwhile was during the bride and groom's dance. Amanda, very discreetly, called us to dance beside them. Ethan and I were there, in the center, spinning slowly, when Mia tried to approach. For the first time, she seemed disarmed. Ethan, can I talk to you? She asked with that look she thought was irresistible. He let go of my hand, looked at her and said, with complete calm, no, I'm busy loving your sister. Mia froze. I took a deep breath, looked at her and added, and for the first time in years, I'm being truly loved, something you never understood, because you only know how to confuse attention with love. She took 2 steps back, with tears in her eyes, and tripped over her own dress hem. No one laughed. It was worse. Everyone ignored her. That hurt more. She left the hall a few minutes later. And me. I kept dancing. For the first time in a long time, feeling like I was the one who had won. But my favorite part was still to come. A few weeks later, I was invited to participate in a podcast about overcoming and new beginnings. I didn't use names, but I told the story. The one about the narcissistic sister, the unfaithful fiancé, the calculated revenge, and of course, the unexpected love. The episode went viral. People from all over the country sending messages, congratulating me, saying they identified with it. Mia listened. I know she did, because the same day she sent a message to my DM. Do you really need to expose yourself like this just to get applause? And I replied without hesitation. It's not exposure. It's liberation. I lived years in your theater. Now the story is mine. And so is the stage. She never replied. In the following days, I learned from third parties that Mia was becoming reclusive. Some brands she was trying to partner with cut contact. People started commenting about her obsession with Ethan. The reputation she fought so hard to build with filters and ready-made phrases began to crumble. And it wasn't me who brought it down. She sank herself. And me? I kept living. Ethan was no longer just a piece in my revenge. The truth is that, in the middle of all that chaos, he became shelter. A shelter that came disguised as an ally, but today was a true companion. And every day that passed, I saw what Mia tried to destroy only made me stronger. And she, who always wanted to win through manipulation, now only had silence as company. The first time I realized I wasn't thinking about Ryan anymore was on an ordinary morning, weeks after Amanda's wedding. We were in my apartment, the sun was gently shining through the window, and Ethan was in the kitchen, shirtless, making pancakes, the way he had been doing since the first week he spent with me. And while he hummed softly a song from the 2000s, doing ridiculous little dances that made me laugh, I realized Ryan was nothing more than a weak shadow in a dusty corner of my memory. It wasn't just revenge, not anymore. It was the way Ethan held my hand even when he didn't need to. It was how he listened to my childhood stories with a sincere smile, even though he already knew them all. It was how he looked at me while I read a book on the couch, as if he didn't need anything else in the world. I didn't expect this. When I called him in that impulsive message to help destroy my sister's fantasy, I thought it would be temporary, that he would pretend for a while until Mia gave up, until I felt avenged, and then life would return to normal. But it didn't return. Ethan became routine, presence, security. He met my friends, integrated into my work circle, started leaving toothbrushes and t-shirts at my house. When my car broke down, he was the first to show up with coffee and a tow truck. When I had an anxiety attack before an important presentation, he sat with me on the kitchen floor and stayed silent, just holding my hand, until I could breathe again. And Ryan? Not even a thought. Not one comparison. Nothing. He, who was once the center of my world, was now irrelevant. Because now I had someone who was present even on ordinary days. Ryan was made of future promises. Ethan, of present actions. One night, we went to dinner at a new restaurant that opened in town. Nothing fancy, just a nice atmosphere and good food. When we sat down, Ethan held my hand across the table and said, with that light tone I already knew well, "You know what's funny? We started this to fool your sister, but I never pretended anything." I was silent for a few seconds, my heart racing. I'm not pretending anymore either, I replied, with an almost embarrassed smile. He laughed and raised his wine glass. To the best revenge, then? No, I corrected. To what comes after them. We toasted. And for the first time in a long time, I was at peace. Without resentment, without ghosts, without wanting someone to notice or validate me. I was there for myself, and so was he. A few days later, walking through downtown, I saw Ryan, alone, walking with his head down, as if the world was too heavy. It was automatic. I looked away. Not from pain, but because it simply didn't matter anymore. He saw me, hesitated, almost came to talk. But when he noticed Ethan approaching and intertwining his fingers with mine, he backed away. Maybe he finally understood that there was no more space for him, that the place he wasted with lies and omissions was now occupied by someone who, without promising anything, gave me everything. That night I hugged Ethan tighter and whispered without thinking much, "Thank you for showing up." He looked at me with that calm smile that said everything, even in silence. And I knew. Revenge gave me justice. But it was the after that gave me love. Months passed, and what began as a sharp response to my sister's poison became the sweetest part of my life. Ethan was no longer a plan, a move, a well-orchestrated provocation. He was my home, my partner in silences and laughter. We slept together almost every night, sometimes at my house, sometimes at his, where the golden retriever insisted on sleeping between us, like a guardian accomplice to this unlikely story. He officially asked me to be his girlfriend on a simple night, on the couch, while we ate pizza straight from the box and watched a silly documentary about marine life. "Do you think it's too early for this?" he asked, with the pizza box balanced on his lap and a smile at the corner of his mouth. "Or is it already too late?" "I think we've already been through worse phases than any couple together for 20 years, I replied, laughing. "It's just a title, but yes, I want to." And that's how it stayed. We didn't talk about Mia anymore. She disappeared from conversations, from social media, from messages. She blocked Ethan on everything, even though he never sought contact. She told acquaintances that she would never forgive me, that I had stolen the love of her life just to rub in her face what she couldn't have. She didn't bother to admit that she destroyed my wedding before all of this. But you know what? I didn't care anymore. At first, I thought I would care, that I would keep dwelling on the fact that she didn't acknowledge her own guilt, that I would beg for an apology that never came. But the truth is that the freedom I felt when I stopped wanting Mia's approval was the greatest gift that whole chaos gave me. She didn't forgive me. She didn't come to my birthday. She didn't respond to my mother's messages about Christmas. She stayed away, hurt, revolted. And me? I moved on. I traveled with Ethan to the countryside, met his mother, this time officially, helped paint the wall of the new clinic he opened, learned to deal with the messy dog, and little by little, we built a routine that was light, true, without masks, without games. There was a day when we were lying in the hammock, just listening to the wind and the sound of birds, when he said to me, "Do you still think all of this was just revenge?" I thought for a few seconds, and then I smiled, turning my face to him. Maybe it started that way, but it ended up being the best thing I ever did for myself. He kissed my forehead, and we stayed in silence. Revenge became love, and ironically, that's what must have hurt Mia the most. She always wanted to be the center, the most beautiful, the most desired, the most worthy of attention. But it was offstage, away from the script she always tried to write, that I found what she spent her whole life pretending to have. I was never the family highlight. I was never the most loved. I was never the perfect sister. But I was the only one who knew how to transform pain into strength, rejection into freedom, and revenge into love. And that, no one will ever take away from me. 6 months later, when I thought all the storms had passed, I received an unexpected call. It was Ryan. I didn't answer the first time, or the second. On the third, Ethan was beside me and simply said, "Answer it. You need to close this cycle." "Hello," I replied, with the most neutral voice possible. "Melissa, it's me." His voice sounded tired, defeated. Can I talk to you? In person?" I thought about hanging up, but Ethan was right. There was something that needed to be said. We arranged to meet at a neutral cafe, far from any place that held our memories. When I arrived, he was already there. Disheveled hair, deep dark circles. He seemed to have aged years in just a few months. "Thank you for coming," he said, without looking me in the eyes. "What do you want, Ryan?" He sighed deeply. "I wanted to Apologize. Really. And explain. Explain what? That you were holding hands with my sister 3 weeks before our wedding? It wasn't like that, he murmured. She came to me when you were sick, said she needed to talk about something important about you, that there were things from your past I needed to know before marrying you. I felt a knot in my stomach. Typical Mia. And you believed her? She brought evidence, or at least things that seemed like evidence. Said you had destroyed some girl's life in high school, that you were vindictive, manipulative. She showed old conversations taken out of context. He finally looked at me. I got confused, scared. And that's why you went to bed with her? No. He shook his head desperately. She said she had been in love with me since we met, that she just hadn't said anything because she respected you, that if I canceled the wedding, she would be there for me. I was drinking, I was confused with everything she had told me about you. Ryan, I interrupted. None of that justifies what you did. I know. Tears began to form in his eyes. 5 minutes after you left, I understood. I understood that she had manipulated me, that all of it was lies, that I had destroyed the best thing in my life because of her. I remained silent for a long time. You know what hurts me most, Ryan? It's not even what you did. It's that you didn't trust me. In 2 years together, you believed her words more than who I really was. He lowered his head. I tried calling you afterward. 1,000 times. I went to your house, but you were never there. Until I saw the photos with him, and I understood it was too late. It was too late the moment you put your hand in her hair, I replied, standing up. But thank you for explaining. It helps me be sure I made the right choice. He looked at me one last time. Are you happy with him? I smiled for the first time during the entire conversation, happier than I imagined I could be. And I left, without resentment, just with the certainty that some doors need to be closed for others to open completely. The conversation with my family was harder. It took 3 months before my mother called asking us to talk. She suggested lunch, just the two of us, to work things out. I found a different woman, older, more tired. The wrinkles around her eyes seemed deeper. How are you? She asked, hesitant. Good, Mom. Very good. And Ethan? He's good, too. We're good. She nodded, nervously fidgeting with her napkin. I need to apologize to you, she finally said, for all the years that I didn't see clearly. I felt my chest tighten. Mom? No, let me talk. She looked me in the eyes for the first time. I always knew Mia was difficult, but I thought if I gave her more attention, if I protected her more, she would change. And in the process, I neglected you. I left you to deal with the consequences of her problems alone. Tears began to stream down my face. After you confronted us that day, I started putting the pieces together. The friends Mia lost, the boyfriends who disappeared, the stories that never added up. And I realized that you two told me very different versions of the same story, and I always chose to believe hers. Why? I asked, my voice choked. Because she cried louder, my mother admitted, her voice breaking. Because you always seemed stronger, more capable of taking care of yourself. And I confused strength with not needing support. We sat in silence for a few minutes. And now? I asked. How is Mia? She moved to another state. She's in therapy. Said she needs to start over away from all this. My mother hesitated. She asked me to tell you that she knows she was wrong, but that she can't apologize to you yet. And I can't forgive yet. I replied honestly. Maybe someday, but not now. I understand. She reached her hand across the table. Can I try to be a better mother? To you? I held her hand. We can try to be a better family, but it will take time. She smiled with tears in her eyes. I have time. A few weeks later, my father showed up at my house. Without warning, with a bouquet of flowers and the face of someone who didn't quite know what to say. Can I come in? He asked, timid. Of course, Dad. Ethan was in the kitchen and greeted my father politely before stepping away, giving us space to talk. I like him, my father said, straight to the point. Seems like a good man. He is. I came here because your mother said you two talked, and I realized I never apologized to you. My father was never one for many words, so this surprised me. I always knew Mia was problematic, he continued, but I thought it wasn't my problem, that it was women's business, that your mother would solve it. But in the end, you both suffered. And you especially. Dad, no, daughter, let me finish. He sat on the edge of the sofa. I failed as a father. I failed to protect you. I failed to educate her. And I failed to teach you both that sisters should support each other, not destroy each other. I felt a lump in my throat. Your mother told me about Ryan, about what she did to you. He shook his head. If it were me, I would never forgive. But you found a way to transform all that pain into something good. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of you. They were the words I had waited my whole life to hear. Thank you, Dad. Do you think there's still time for me to be a better father? I smiled, even with my eyes welling up. There's always time. That night, I told Ethan everything. He listened in silence, just holding my hand. How do you feel? He asked when I finished. Free, I replied, surprised by my own response. For the first time, truly free. And about Mia? I thought for a moment. I hope she finds her peace. Away from me, but I hope she finds it. He smiled and kissed my forehead. You're incredible, you know that? We're incredible, I corrected. Us. And it was true. Because in the end, it wasn't just about beating Mia or getting revenge on her. It was about learning that I deserved to be loved properly, defended, respected. It was about discovering that family isn't just who's born with you, but who chooses to stay by your side. It was about realizing that sometimes, to find the love of your life, you first need to stop accepting crumbs from those who never valued you. And today, when I wake up next to Ethan, with the dog sleeping at our feet, I know all the battles were worth it, because they brought me here. To him, to us, to peace,